I'm gonna start off today's podcast with one story that I'm really excited to share with you, and then one that's pretty awkward and embarrassing. I really don't want to share with you, but I try to keep it honest on here. And then we'll see if we could get around to some phone calls towards the end of the episode.
Pop Talks.
My mom's in town, and yesterday she asked me if I wanted to go to this little French bakery. It's about 2 miles away from the house, so we walked. And it was a beautiful day out. There was no clouds, and we were having a good conversation. We make it to the bakery. I get my cappuccino. She gets her cappuccino. And I get a little croissant with bacon, egg, cheese. That thing was delicious. She gets a little French sandwich. Anyways, me and my mom are sitting at this cafe, having a good conversation. This parking enforcer comes up. She walks around the whole restaurant and warns everybody, saying, if you haven't fed the meters, I'm going to unfortunately have to give you a ticket, which is so kind. And so we don't have a car, so we're like, no, it's okay. And so she walks out of the restaurant and starts to go check parking meters all around this block. And she gets to the last car in the block, and she notices that this car is running. So she walks into the restaurant, and she's like, hey, whoever's running car this is, last chance, I'm going to have to give it a ticket. And so she goes back, nobody responds, and she goes and writes the ticket. And some guy runs up to his car, and he starts cussing her out and hops in the car and drives away. My mom watches that whole thing and says, wow, that guy's really rude. That guy got in his car and ran away and was rude to her. She's just trying to enforce the law. I'm going to go give her a pastry. And so my mom comes back and says the parking lady could have written a runaway ticket, which would have been way more, but she won't. And I asked my mom, and I say, honestly, would you be able to give that guy the pastry? And she says, absolutely not. That guy sucks. And I said to my mom, I love the Bible because it's taught me how to read stories from multiple different perspectives. And in that story, I'm that guy, and Jesus is the parking enforcer, trying to enforce the law. How many times have I escaped my punishment? How many times have I evaded the thing that I deserve most? After warning, after warning, after warning, he still gives me grace. And the reason why there's so many more parking enforcers that are all divorced and angry and losing their hair, and they sit there and yell at people and write them tickets if they're 1 minute over, because it's a lot easier to be that guy than the woman who raises her hand and says, I want to take all the hate, I want to take all of the punishment, and I want to still be able to put out love into the world. Now, I don't like parking enforcers, and I don't like paying to park in a city that I already pay taxes for on the streets and stuff, but I think I could just learn a little bit from this, And the second story is so awkward, it makes me want to crawl up inside myself and just molt, and then go lay inside of a cupboard, or maybe at the bottom of the ocean. I was sitting there one day minding my own business. My friend, I see that he sent me a story, and I look at it, and it's this girl that, she's pretty and stuff. I know her from high school and stuff, but I stopped following her once I got a girlfriend, and I think maybe he thinks she's pretty, and he sent it to me with the eyes looking emoji. And so I was like, bro, you should have stopped following her a while ago, because he needs to lock in. And I go back onto my day-to-day, and I'm on my other account, and I'm responding to a few messages and comments, and I see that girl send me a question mark. And I'm like, oh my God, I sent that to her. I accidentally responded to her story saying, should have stopped following her a while ago. And she hits me with a question mark. And I say, water on my phone. And she goes, yeah, right. Because if you look at my Instagram, I don't even follow her. So there's no way I could have seen that story unless somebody sent it to me or I was looking it up. And so I was sitting there and I'm like, oh my God. I immediately just put that little lie out there. And then she's like, yeah, right. Hope you're doing well. Smiley face. And I said likewise. And I sat there and I was like, bro, I say so much that I would rather be hated for the truth than loved for a lie. But in this scenario, it looks like I'm going to be hated for the lie as well. And I just chose to lie because it was quick and easy, but it didn't even make sense. If I'm going to lie, at least let it be a good lie, right? And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my God, I haven't talked to this girl since middle school or maybe high school. I used to be in kind of a friend group with her, and now I'm not, and I haven't talked to her in a while. And so I just tell her the truth. I don't say my friend's name, but I was like, honestly, somebody sent this to me, and I told him to stop following you because he needs to lock in. And honestly, girls sometimes get mad that guys look at their stories and their Instagram posts like that in a lustful way. But when you post lustful pictures, what do you expect out of the guys, And so I try to unfollow all of that content because, I don't know, I try to hold myself accountable, when I fall into these things. And so I was just trying to talk to my friend and like tell him to not do that. And somehow it flipped on me and made me the weirdo. And I was like, and I'm so curious why God put me in this scenario. I texted her kind of like, I can't call myself a Christian and only value the truth sometimes. So I was willing to tell the truth. I wasn't willing to sell out my friend because maybe in this scenario I deserve to take the heat. I deserve to take the punishment because that's the type of person I led my friend to think I was, like somebody to send me that. And so I'm just kind of sitting there, just freaking cringing to all hell, and I'm just like, it sucked. But I resolved it by saying the truth. I think she respected the honesty. I don't know if she hates me or whatever, but I think that I don't really care, honestly, what most people think. I'm gonna put myself out there, and that's what this whole podcast is like, I'm gonna put the truth out there, and if people like it, that's great, but if people hate it, that's great too. Jesus says the truth will set you free, and I truly believe that, like, I would have been shackled down by this feeling that, like, I'm a liar, and that would have teared me up. So I was like, I'm much more willing to tell the truth. That's obviously very embarrassing. Obviously, I don't want to say it, but I'm going to say it anyways, and I'm able to sleep happily and love myself at the end of the day. And I love that Jesus says the truth will set you free, because right before this, I was reading about the story of the paralyzed man at Bethesda, and Jesus walks up to this guy and says, do you want to be healed? I think that's an interesting question. I feel like oftentimes I don't want to be healed. I feel like oftentimes I send a prayer up to Jesus and I'm like, get me through this. I'm at this like maybe crossroad of my life or depressed or whatever. Just get me through this. Or maybe I'm falling into the same temptation that I've always fallen into. And I was like, Lord, just make this temptation go away. But a little part of me deep down inside knows that I'm going to go back to that temptation. And it's almost like in that prayer, there's this little fine print that's like, I'm lying to you a little bit. And so to truly come to Jesus and be like, yeah, I want to be healed, and tell the truth, what happens to the man then? He immediately gets healed, and Jesus says to him, go and sin no more. He tells you to stop falling into that sin. And that I feel like a lot of my prayers are like, stop this sin or stop this weakness or stop this thing right in the moment. But I don't feel like that is Christianity. I feel like Christianity is saying, I will go through the thing in the moment so it will stop in the future. I feel like my prayer should include, hey, if I have to go through this sin for the future me to be better, or for the future of my kids, or for the future of my family, or for the future of my friends, or the future of the world to be better, then let me go through it. That's what Jesus was thinking while he was carrying that cross up the hill on Calvary. That's what I should be thinking when I'm carrying my cross, is let me go through this in order to be able to glorify your name. And so I don't mind going through the awkward thing. And I sat there and I thought to myself, man, bro, like, why would God actually put me through this? This is the most embarrassing thing ever. But I think all works for the good for those who love God. And so I'm thinking to myself, like, what kind of chapter am I in right now? That's a question I ask myself a lot. And I think I'm in this chapter of kind of transplanting my life into a new place. Like where I grew up, I've built this foundation. And there's a good part about leaving it and a bad part about leaving it. The bad part is all of it goes away. Everything I've worked for, my name, my reputation, all these things goes away once I leave this place. But the good part is some of that foundation was built on loose sand, was built on bad ground, and it wasn't worth building, the rest of my life on. That old story that I have was a good old story for a while, but I'm excited for this new story. This new Harlan, this new chapter, this new soil that I get to grow in. Because I feel like I've only been living for about like a year and a half now. And so this new Harlan, I feel like, is going to be able to build a foundation that is far stronger than the one I built here that was built on sin and iniquities. And so I'm trying my absolute best to be able to walk in love and walk faithfully. I've been stumbling, but I've been falling forward. And there's a difference between falling forward and falling backward. Falling forward is, it's momentum. It's moving towards something, a greater goal, a greater cause. And I feel like I don't mind falling forward as much as I hate falling backwards. Falling forward means that like I was actually trying something, but falling backwards means that I'm just kind of going back into the same sins. But that old story isn't going to work anymore. It worked for a while, but I'm tired of having this story of low self-worth or feeling worthless. But I don't want to make the opposite mistake. You know, I got recognized for the first time the other day at the gym by this guy named Taylor. Shout out Taylor. And then I got recognized today by, what's his name? Is it Israel? But they come up and they're like, hey, I really love your podcast. And I don't think they realize that I've never done this before. I've never been recognized for something good. It's almost always been like, you're that one kid that accidentally commented on somebody's story, embarrassing thing. So I'm sitting there and I'm just trying to be engaged with people who come up to me, because I realize like that is such a gift. I don't need a trophy. I don't need any amount of money from this. But if I have people spending their precious time to come up and talk to me and say like, hey, you're doing a good job with this and it affected my life, that's all I need. Me and my mentor talk all the time, and he asked me this question: would you do it if even just one person got a little bit closer to God? One person learned to love God just a little bit more. And the answer is always yes, 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 1,000 times yes. And that's who I do my content for, is that person who I probably will never see, but I could change their life just even 1%. If you guys like this talk and stuff, I would love for you to support it. Please drop a follow. And speaking of followers, thank you guys so much for all the positive feedback. I've been getting a ton of messages and voicemails. I promise I see all of them. Not every single one of them is going to end up in the episode because it's pretty hard to do, but let's see how many calls we can get through right now. All right, let's get into this.
Hey man, I just saw your reel about, Matthew 6, where he's talking about, God clothes the grasses of the fields and takes care of the lilies. And man, I don't know, I feel like if you could just give me prayer over that, I feel like I'm kind of in the season where I really, really need to trust on God. Not in like, oh, I need him, need him to move in crazy ways, but I feel like he's building my trust. And there's some things, I need to grow my faith in that, to not have little faith and to not, worry, but to trust him more. So I was just wondering if you could give me a prayer, man. And I'm in a good spot. I got, last council, I got my leadership, I got my guidance. So it's, I'm not in a, a spot where I need crazy help. But man, if you could just, and it doesn't even have to be on the podcast, man, if you could just pray for me, in your own time, that'd be amazing. And I appreciate it so much. And, yeah, thank you.
God bless, brother. You didn't say your name at the beginning, but I just want to thank you for your call. I think that Matthew 6 verse pertains to the little faith action of being like, God, I want you to fix this right now. I want you to fix this right now. Oftentimes I run to Jesus when I need the little fixes, and I show a little bit of faith. But I feel like the big faith, the grander faith, is having faith in the bigger plan and having faith that things are going to work out in the end, despite what I'm going through right now. I feel like oftentimes when I'm praying to Jesus and I'm like, Lord, help me with this sin, there's a little devil inside me who knows I'm going to keep on sinning. There's like a little fine print that's like, help me with this sin right now. And sometimes God does offer peace for that thing. Sometimes he doesn't. I'm not claiming to be tapped into his big plan, but are you able to walk away from that sin or that failure and still be like, God is going to have it be okay in the end? John Lennon kind of says this thing, in the end it will be all right. And if it isn't all right, it isn't the end. So I just like to pray sometimes to Jesus and say, whatever I go through, have it be glorifying towards you at the end of the day. And that's kind of what faith is knowing that in the end I will be okay and I'll be with him. Why am I acting like the people who don't have gods, and the people who don't have faith? And I know exactly what you mean by saying like, God, I don't need you to move in crazy ways. I just need you to build my faith, and we need to build our relationship with each other because I've been away from you for so long. And how you get big faith isn't overnight. It's like a tree that you have to water and give the correct nutrients, and read your Bible and talk to him. And so, brother, I'll be definitely praying for you. This sounds like a very exciting time in your life. Let's get into the next one.
Hello. I was kind of just curious on a couple of definitions that you might have, or like definitions pertaining to yourself. I was wondering what honesty meant to you, and if you could give me a definition behind that. What do you feel about empathy, and how does it change based on the way they look? How do you feel about, sorry, I can't think of a really good way to word it. So I'll just leave it with those two questions, really, man. Thanks, man. I really appreciate your podcast that you do. It's really cool. Need to be more honest people in the world.
Thank you, bro. I really appreciate you calling in. You didn't say your name, but just thank you for the phone call. It's kind of weird that you called in and asked this, and I responded it in this episode. I like to go through and dissect words and kind of understand what they mean before I say them to people, because words have a lot of power. But honesty really isn't something I've defined. I guess kind of off the top of my head, honesty would be doing something that is truthful to the best of your knowledge, despite the outcome. It's not persuaded by money. It's not persuaded by politics or feelings. Honesty sometimes can be cold. I feel like you can't have growth without honesty. And I feel like empathy is the capability to understand another person's perspective. Not just the good guy, not just the righteous, but the sinner. Empathy shouldn't be based off of looks or feelings or anything like that. But oftentimes we do. And I think you're kind of referring to that one video I made about getting put next to an overweight lady on the plane. And I feel like oftentimes my empathy is based off of looks, and it shouldn't be. And since that video, I've been trying to change that. Can't say I'm perfect, but I'm curious to know what other question you had. But yeah, I really appreciate the phone call and making me think. And guys, that's gonna do it for this episode. I really appreciate the phone calls and you guys talking to me. It really makes the episode come to life. And if you stuck around to the end, comment Honest Abe so I know who stuck around to the end. See ya. Peace.
So you got the cross, right?
Yes.